Melissa George from the KCS Academy, or the Consortium for Service Innovation, depending on what hat I am wearing. I'm joined today by my colleagues Kelly Murray and Jill DeGraff, which you've probably interacted with at some point in time, particularly Jill, if you're have been part of the registration process for the KCS Academy. So welcome, Kelly and Jill. So for those of you that don't know, the KCS Academy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Consortium for Service Innovation. The consortium branch of this organization is around innovation, really focusing on R&D in the future, and work with our members very closely on strategies for coming up with better service excellence for the future, where the KCS Academy is focused strictly on KCS and bringing it out to the masses, so more beyond our membership, to everyone in the industry who is implementing KCS. And so we, Jill, Kelly, and I, and also Greg Oxton, are the staff of the consortium and the Academy. So depending on which part of this we're working on, we play both roles. So any questions that you have about the methodology itself and KCS, we pretty much can cover all aspects of that. So thank you for joining today. If you're anything like me, you procrastinate on something like this. I'm sure it's not the #1 thing that you're focused on doing today, but you know that at some point you want to get this done and get your certification upgraded. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for, you'll thank yourself for kind of getting the fire lit under you to get this out of your way and get your certification updated. So as most of you know, we upgraded KCS, went from KCS version 5 to KCS version 6 in April of last year, 2016. So KCS version 6 has been out for almost a year now. The version 6 of the bridge exam was released in August of 2016, and what we decided to do was offer a bridge course so that people who held a KCS V5 certification didn't have to go through the entire certification process again. So we decided to offer a low-cost, low barrier to entry option for the V5 to V6 bridge upgrade. So what we have on the agenda is, first of all, talking about how to register for the exam. It's changed since version 5, so I want to make sure everybody knows where to go to do that. Talk about some changes in vocabulary, and then we'll get into each area that there are changes for version 6, and I've broken them down into content health, process integration, leadership, adoption, and then the new component of KCS V6 was we broke out the principles and core concepts from the practices guide, because those standing on their own will apply across any type of implementation of KCS. So what we decided to do for V6 was make it more generic, and so that anyone doing KCS, no matter what industry they were in or what function their job was within an organization, could pick up the KCS V6 Principles and Core Concepts Guide and really understand what KCS is all about. And then the Practices Guide would be specific to their job and function. And so that's why we split those out. So there's nothing new about the Principles and Core Concepts. They've always been there. They've just been embedded in the Practices Guide. So we've kind of taken those out and made them separate. The other important thing to know is where everything is. So these are some resources that you need to know. You should have received the actual links in the email invitation to this webinar. And if you haven't, Kelly can put some of those in the chat. Probably the most important thing to have is the KCS V6 practices instructions. Within those instructions will be the links to how to register for the exam, also the study guide for the exam, the practices guide, which is the 150-page document with all of the information in it, and then the newly created Principles and Core Concepts guide. So an overview of the exam itself is that it is 25 questions. These questions are on the new objectives, so changes or things that were added to version 6, or things that may have been in version 5 that were just not clear, people weren't getting, and we needed to either rewrite that section of the practices guide or emphasize it a little bit more. So some of it you will think, well, this isn't new, this has always been around, but we decided that it needed to be emphasized. It is not proctored, so this means that you can take it at any time that you decide you want to take it at your desktop. So like the proctored exams, you can do this on your own and you can use any learning materials that you have access to. You only have 60 minutes to take it, which we've found is plenty of time for only 25 questions. We've have a much lower cost than the full exam, which is $85. And in order to take the bridge exam, you must already hold a KCS Practices V5 certification or a KCS Publisher certification. If you don't, when you go in to register, it will not show that you can, and that as an option of something that you can buy. So if you go in to register and it does not show up for you that you can buy the bridge exam, it's because you don't have one of these certifications. And if you think that you do and you don't, then I would encourage you to send an email to info@thekcsacademy.net. So maybe, Kelly, you could put that link in the chat. And Jill, if that's not where you want them to go, you should speak up now. Okay, so the bridge.
Sorry, yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I had to unmute, but yes, info@ is just fine.
Okay, so then we'll funnel them all through a central mailbox so that they can be handled. And that goes for any other questions or trouble that you have getting the exam set up or with your registration or anything like that. Those should all go at info@thekcsacademy.net, and we can deal with those. So another reason for us having this webinar today is because we saw that there were over 600 people that were still holding the V5 certification that hadn't upgraded. And we really wanted people to take advantage of this low barrier to entry to get their certification upgraded. I know you worked very hard to get the V5 certifications. I know the exam is not easy, particularly when it's proctored. So we really encourage people to take this bridge exam, and you only have until September 1st of this year in order to pass it. So if you haven't passed before September 1st, then you won't have the opportunity, and you'll have to take the full KCS V6 practices certification in order to get a V6 certification. If you have questions as we're going, type them into the chat window and Kelly can help me field those questions. So what I encourage you all now to do is to go to the registration page and pull it up if you haven't already been there. So I find the easiest way to get there is to go to the KCSacademy.net homepage. And then under the certification tab, go to KCS Practices V5 to V6 Bridge Exam. So once you get there, you'll see a link to WebAssessor. So register a WebAssessor. So if you click on that WebAssessor link, it will take you to this page. Now, most of you should already have a login because you took your you took the other exam in WebAssessor. So although you may have remembered registering through a system called I7 or a credential management system, that has gone away. So the only thing that you need to go into in order to take this is into WebAssessor, and you will pay and register for the exam all right here. So if you go through your email, you'll find something from the KCS Academy with your account login. If you can't find that, you can click on the forgot password, and it'll be, it's not on this screen because I already have, my account was logged in, but it'll be in this upper right corner of the homepage, and you can click Forgot Password, and it will email it to the account that you registered with in WebAssessor. So if you've changed your email address, or if you forgot what account you used, those are also the kinds of things that you're going to have to send a message to info@kcsacademy.net so that Jill or I can get you your email address that you used. Because if you don't use the same email address or account name, it won't know that you've already passed the exam, so you won't qualify to take the exam. And if you want to change the email or account name, you can. You just need to let us know what that's going to be changed to, and we can change the email for you.
And can I just interject one thing? This is Jill. If that is the case, go ahead if you want to and send the email right now, and I will try to answer it right away while this call is going on so you can get registered.
So Kelly, in the chat, okay, you put in, I'm looking at the chat now, you did put in the page to the instructions so that they can get to the WebAssessor screen.
Yes, that's the page with the link with the bridge exam details.
There's the link to the WebAssessor. I had that in the wrong order. So once you get in, this is a little bit hidden because the font's small on your screen when you're in WebAssessor, but this is where you click Register for Exam. And once you click that, you'll see the catalog. And what you want to do is click this plus sign next to the KCS V6 Practices Catalog, and that will expand your window to show the list of options for the exam. And what you should see now is this, pick this one. It's usually, I think it's the first one in the list, the KCS Practices Bridge Exam. And if it doesn't say buy now next to it, that means that for some reason you're not qualifying. And this is when you should reach out to us to find out why that's not showing up. Okay. So one of the questions was about, do we have to register right now? You don't have to register right now. I just encourage you to register right now so that you have committed to make it happen. If you register right now, you do not have to take the exam right now. You can register now and then come back. As long as you take and pass it before September 1st, it will still be in your account. And once you register, there'll be a launch button. So you could register right now, log out in a few days, come back, log into your account, and you'll see the launch button, and you can launch that at any time. So let's start with some vocabulary changes. First one is that we've changed what the S in KCS stands for. A lot of people don't even know that KCS stands for Knowledge Centered Support, did stand for Knowledge Centered Support, and we've changed that to Knowledge Centered Service. A hint here is this question is on the exam, and there's one that says services and one that says service. So make sure you pick the right one that's knowledge-centered service, not knowledge-centered services. So that's a little bit of a trick question. It is in the practices guide that way. So if you look it up, you'll see, if you forget it and you look it up, you'll see that it's without the S. So it's knowledge-centered service. And the reason for that is that we're expanding KCS beyond support. So we want to say it's for all types of service that you're covering within your organization. We've changed the terminology from support analyst to knowledge worker, again, to make it more generic and apply to people who might be working in HR, for example, providing service to their employees around knowledge. We've changed the word customer to requester or user. So anyone can request help, any kind of user or requester. So we're being more generic and calling it a requester. Changing it from the word business to organization, changing the word so also responder. So knowledge worker or responder is another vocabulary change that we've made. Instead of saying the support analyst workflow, we might say the requester responder workflow. And we're also talking about experience-based knowledge versus compliance-based knowledge, which we'll talk more about when we get into the governance section of the presentation. So the way I've laid this out is by section, and at the beginning of each section, I'm giving you the objectives, which are in the study guide. So if you have access to your study guide, I would pull that up now, the link to the study guide. And for each objective, they're linked, and it takes you directly into the practices guide where that particular piece of content is covered. So if you haven't found the study guide yet, this is a great tool to have on hand for studying. I do recommend that you go through this as well as after the presentation and just read through each of these sections again after we go through the presentation, and then review them to make sure you understand each objective for each section. And the objectives map very closely to the questions on the exam. I'm going to go through these same areas in a little more detail with the PowerPoint slides. I'm not going to go into the practices guide, but I encourage you to do that after we're done. So, article state. So, if you remember before, article states were just about controlling, but it was a combination of what the state of the article was and who could see it. And what we've done is split out the article state into 3 different components. So one is article confidence, and that one is around, this would be something you would set as a metadata attribute or field within the article. So you've written the article, and now you have to, as a knowledge worker, indicate how confident you are in the quality of that resolution and the article's compliance to the content standard. So if it's you're just starting out, you would mark it as a work in progress, WIP work in progress. The next one is not validated, validated and archived. So those are the 4 article confidence levels that we're recommending for version 6. And in combination with confidence, there would also be a visibility setting. So within an organization now, you would have the flexibility to set, if you wanted your external audience to see things that were not validated, you have the ability to do that now through an article visibility field. So by setting it either internal or external, you can decide which audience has visibility to that article, independent of what the confidence in that article is. What we see mostly is the external stuff has been validated, but it gives you the flexibility to do either one. So the article visibility defines what audience can see that article. And then the third one is around governance. And this is put in place for what we're calling compliance-based policy type articles. So anything, if you think of traditional KCS as capture in the workflow and demand-driven, those would be experience-based articles. Those are being created by someone experiencing the product, experiencing this exception to the product. And those continue to evolve and change and are very dynamic, where a compliance-based article might be something, a company policy around payroll or something that you want to have a very close control on. So it's really a kernel. It's not going to change very often. Only a certain set of people can have the right to create or modify compliance-based articles. So the 2 settings for governance would be compliance or experience-based. So this is just a diagram of the article confidence. Again, for the knowledge worker to indicate how confident they are in the quality of that article. These are the various states, just a little more detail around them. Work in progress is that we don't know the resolution. Not validated is that we have a resolution but low confidence in it, and the article is complete from our perspective. Validated is that the article is complete and complies with the content standard, and we have a high confidence in the resolution. And archive is that it's no longer relevant. The visibility states, internal, external. We've seen this also expanded out. We've seen people have several different levels of visibility. If you wanted to put partners in there, you wanted to put trusted partners versus or trusted customers versus public. So you could have many levels of article visibility if your company chooses to. Again, the internal one, the two settings for governance would be compliance-based or experience-based. So a small group can modify versus a large group of KCS licensed contributors or publishers would be modifying the experience-based. Experience-based articles are just in time. They're created in response to demand. They're created and improved as part of the solve loop. Evolve loop articles, what we talked about, these are the ones that are created by the knowledge domain experts based on patterns and trends of article reuse. And then the compliance-based articles are the ones that are created by a designated group of people. So characteristics of an article is that, the state are 3 independent attributes to review that. Articles evolve over time based on demand and usage. That's basic KCS. As people find and use articles, they should improve them. Flag it or fix it has to be part of the organization's culture. Knowledge workers take responsibilities for the articles they interact with. Those are nothing new. Those are, other than the 3 states being independent, all of those other things are basic KCS. The next session is process integration. We'll go into that. So if you look at indicators of KCS value and health, there's the content health, the bottom one, around are we adhering to the content standard? This is been measured this is measured by the AQI, or the Article Quality Index. The Article Quality Index hasn't changed in version 6. It's still there, meant to measure adherence to the content standard. The process integration is what's new. So what we've put in place is a process integration indicator, which measures how knowledge workers are adhering to the solve loop, and I'm going to go into that in more details. Who's creating value or performance assessment measures, those have always been in place. And then around communication and leadership, does everyone understand what we're doing? Are we delivering on the values promised to the organization and knowledge workers? In the past, we haven't had any, we've talked about measuring this, but we haven't had a tool to measure it. So in version 6, we're introducing a survey to ask people about KCS, and are we, is KCS understood within the organization? Is the communication of why we're doing KCS understood within the organization? So recommending that we really find out how leadership is doing, as well as how the support analyst or the knowledge workers are doing. So process integration indicators. So the goal of the process integration is really to assess how well we're doing with the solve loop. And why do we care if people are capturing, structuring, reusing, and improving in the workflow? Well, because it's proven to maximize the benefits of KCS. And some of where you see the maximization is, first of all, you're going to minimize article duplicates, and you're going to create articles that are findable because they contain the context of the customer. As we know, if the context of the customer isn't captured as part of the interaction and not captured until after the interaction is complete, we lose a lot of the customer's context or what they experienced. So if we publish something that does not have what the customer experienced, it makes it very hard to find on self-service, because the customer is looking at it from one perspective, and the perspective that the article was written from, if it was written after the problem was solved, is very different. So what we want to do is put an assessment in place to say, are the people creating knowledge articles, the knowledge workers, capturing, structuring, reusing as part of, have they integrated that into their workflow? Like, do they know how to capture why they're on the call with the customer or why they're dealing with a particular incident or case? If not, it then gives us the opportunity to identify coaching moments. So you can see that somebody is maybe still writing notes on a scratch pad instead of capturing it, into the knowledge article. That's a coaching moment. Maybe they say it's too hard for me to do. The coach can then coach them and show them how to make that happen within in the workflow. So what we've done is to make a way that can be measurable, and it's important to start simple. And so the first things to look at might be the link rate and the link accuracy. So one of the things people were experiencing is someone might have an incident and it would have a link to an article, which makes their participation rate look really good. But once that link was opened, it was linked to something like, how do I, what's the phone number for pizza delivery? And this is a true story. It actually happened that people were linking just to anything in order to make the numbers around participation. So link accuracy is as important as link rate. And I don't think people were specifically looking at it in case they came upon that. So what's the difference between the AQI and the PII? So to remember that the article quality index is used by the coaches to assess the adherence to the content standard. And if you remember, the content standard includes the article state. So if they're setting it to work in progress, validated, not validated, or governance, that's part of the article quality index. The process integration indicators is really about the knowledge workers having the solve loop integrated into their workflow. So this is an important distinction. This question, there's a question on the test that people get tripped up on in thinking that the AQI measures the workflow. Just remember that the AQI is still around the things that are in the content standard, as it always has been, and the PII is really about the workflow. So some other parts of what you can measure within the PII is searching activity. So did they search early and often? Timing of the search, the link accuracy, the link rate. So what's the percentage of articles or cases that they have cases linked to articles? Link accuracy is what I just mentioned, making sure it's the right article that they link to, it's in the context of the customer, it's relevant and it's actionable for that customer. It's not a link to a white paper that's 50 pages long that then the customer has to go through and find the answer within that article. And then the modify rate. So we find that with mature KCS implementations, people are, if you don't switch the focus from creation to modification, you're missing a lot of opportunities for improvement within the knowledge articles. So focusing on the modify rate and making sure that people are, every opportunity they can to improve a knowledge article that they're taking that. And then the create rate also, which has always been a focus. So what you can do, and there's some examples of how to do this in the practices guide, is calculating a contribution index so that we can make this measurable and show progress over time, that people are better at adhering to the workflow. So coaching's always been a really important part of KCS. We've beefed up the section in the practices guide around coaching. And just some facts are that training alone increases productivity by 22%, but when combined and followed up with coaching, it increases by 86%. And coaching has also been proven to increase the speed speed of adopting something new. So when someone's being asked to change their way to do things, it really will help improve the time it takes in order for people to get up to speed on that. Coaching never ends. When we first implemented KCS, we thought coaching was a temporary thing for people just learning KCS. But what we're finding now that we've been doing this for 20 years is that there's always something to coach on. And organizations now are continuing to update their article quality index and raise the bar. So if you started with only 6 things you were checking, they might change those 6 things to something that make more advanced, that's going to improve the articles even further. The other thing we've seen happen over the last couple of years is coaching programs for managers. There's been kind of this long-going complaint that my manager doesn't get it, or my manager is still measuring me on activity-based measures, and would keep bumping up against that resistance from particularly middle management to change. So coaching programs for managers, Kristen Hunter at Sage has been doing this for the past couple of years and seeing tremendous results of getting managers together and looking at measures and coaching them on value-based measures versus activity-based measures. And how do you measure value? It's very hard, as we know. So continuing coaching throughout the process. The thing that's important to know for this one on the test is the first 2 bullets here. Those will be questions on the test about increasing productivity and increasing the speed of adoption with coaching. On to leadership. I think this section probably had the most changes within the KCS Practices Guide. We spent a lot of time getting all the processes right, and still people are getting lots of resistance in changing leadership. Leaders have been leading the same way, since the 40s, in a very hierarchical, tiered, structured approach, command and control. So the need for more leadership development when you're coaching or when you're leading a group of people who now are collaborating, who are empowered, who are knowledge sharers, is very different than when you're leading people that are all doing the same process. So it's important for leaders to understand this change, and we've beefed up the leadership section of the Practices Guide to reflect that. So because all knowledge workers are volunteers, if it's hard to force someone to give up their knowledge. So what you need to do is really create a vision through a compelling purpose, mission, values, and brand promise, so that people understand why it's important and why it's important to them, and also to recognize the value they create, and to really evolve the role of the line manager from a command and control to more of a coach and communication leader. Communication effectiveness is how you do this. Delivering on the promise of the KCS benefits. So we've seen time and time again that promises get made at the adoption of how this is going to change people's jobs, or how they may not have to answer the same questions over and over again, and that promise never gets delivered on. So making sure that the benefits really pay off, and that the people are recognized for making those benefits happen, and involving the role of leadership overall. So the elements of the vision are a compelling purpose. So this is important to know the difference between these components. There'll be questions on the exam around this. And really what the compelling purpose is what encourages people to engage. Why do they want to do this in the first place? A mission statement is how do we go about creating value? The values are the acceptable behaviors for how we interact with others creating value. So how will we behave? And the brand promise is, what is it about our relationship with each other? What are the attributes? What are the things you want others to say about us? What did we promise to do? So all of these together create the vision of the organization. So details around the compelling purpose. Again, it is what encourages engagement. It should be known by everyone within the organization of what the compelling purpose is. It should not be self-referencing, clear, concise, brief, elicits an emotional response, and has some type of value proposition tied to it. So something like Nike Just Do It is one of their, is a short, not self-referencing, compelling purpose. We Save Lives. I think it's one person at a time is a drug company's compelling purpose. So really is encourages people, they want to get on board. There's a value proposition for them to do this. So once people are compelled to do something and understand why they're doing it, then it comes down to motivation. And how do we get people motivated to share their knowledge? Because like I said, knowledge work is different than physical work. And really what needs to happen, and this comes from Daniel Pink's book Drive, and if you haven't read it, I would strongly encourage it. Carrots and sticks don't work. It has to come from intrinsic motivations, and it's comes around mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So getting really good at something, learning, growing, drives people. Having control or a choice over what they're doing, and it's something I care about and I'm interested in. So when you think about people creating knowledge articles, you have to think, okay, are they doing this because it's something they're really good at? So they're an expert, they know the answer to this. They have a little bit of control and choice. They know they have control over what they're writing it down. They have control around the impacting the workflow, because we say that the knowledge workers should be the ones that are creating the workflow and creating the article quality index and basically designing the KCS workflow. So there's control there. They feel like they can have a choice on how things might get done or feedback. And then they care about it because they're doing the good towards their customers or whatever your company's compelling purpose is. So what motivates people? This Daniel Herzberg, Frederick Herzberg from Harvard Business Review study we quote all the time. And if you look at it, the items that are in light brown on the bottom are what we call hygiene items. And as long as people's hygiene items are met, so they feel like they have, good sound working conditions, they're getting a decent salary or a fair salary. If those hygiene items are taken care of, then the motivating factors are the things on the top. So the number one thing that motivates people, these studies show, is achievement, and secondly is recognition. So if you think about KCS, they're able to achieve more because they could be finding articles to answer questions that they may not have been able to find before. Recognition comes in the way of things like your articles being published out on the website. So it's giving visibility and recognition to your work. Recognition should also come from leadership, recognizing people for the value that they've created within KCS. So we want to make sure that we understand when we're trying to motivate people to do KCS, the focus would be on those top motivators. This is saying what I just said. So again, reviewing most important hygiene factors. Once those are taken care of, the ones on the right is what are the motivational factors around achievement, recognition, interesting work, and responsibility. If people are not creating knowledge articles or engaging the way that you think that they should be, these are the things to work on the right. Not giving them goals around article creation. So how do we effectively communicate this through leadership? This is where I referred to earlier around a communication effectiveness survey. So putting out a survey, asking people, what is the vision? What is the compelling purpose of this organization? And if people can't answer that question, then I encourage leaders to first of all, making known what the compelling purpose, mission, values, and brand promise of the organization are. And if you think that people know them, ask them and find out if people know them. Ask questions like, why are we doing KCS? And how does it serve that vision? If they can't answer that question, that could be another reason why your KCS implementation isn't going so well. So people don't understand the why behind KCS. What is the benefit to them, the business and the audience that they're serving? What is their role and responsibilities in KCS? And what is the impact of their contribution? Do people believe the organization optimizes the use of knowledge and acknowledge knowledge workers' contribution? A lot of the time there's a big kickoff around adoption. People go off and start doing KCS and then never hear from management or leadership ever again around the impact of their contribution of sharing their knowledge. And then the program will just go downhill after that. So KCS Adoption, another section. This is nothing new. We've just emphasized some more of this because people were not understanding it so well. So the KCS Adoption Guide contains all of the information around that we've gathered over the years around what makes a successful adoption, and understanding that you move through adoption in phases and waves has been the most successful way of adopting KCS. And so why do we recommend phases and waves? Well, first of all, phases, when you're in a particular phase, it's important to recognize where you are because you measure different things when you're at a different phase. So, for example, if you have a measure of participation rate or link rate, that's a really important measure as you're starting out to make sure people are participating. As you move out to web self-service, your measures start to change, and you're looking at how much are we serving up on the website? How are customers being successful with the knowledge articles on the website? Participation, you still should keep your eye on in phase one, but you don't really, it's not your focus anymore. Your focus now is how are our customers being successful. So what happens during phase one is really important to watch and get the phase one measurements where you want them before you may move on to phase two. And then when you move on to phase two, you usually add then additional things that you focus on in phase three and phase four. So really it's about leaders, and understanding the phases of adoption goes back to leadership again, and making sure that leadership knows which phase you're in and what's important at that phase, and then emphasizing, using the measures for that phase. A lot of times reports get generated at the beginning and never get updated. So managers could be getting the same reports on measures at the beginning and not getting the ones they should be getting at the end. So it's important that measures change depending on which phase you're in, and knowing what your focus should be while you're in each phase of adoption. The second part is around waves of adoption, and this is not a new graphic. This has been around, hitting the wrong buttons. This has been around, and so why do we recommend adopting in waves? First of all, so what we recommend is you start with a small group and get everything, the foundation established. Have that group go off and do KCS and start to measure their success. And once they've been successful, so meaning that people are participating at a certain rate, the article quality index is at a certain level where you think it's acceptable, you have coaches developed, coaching those people, then deploy to more people. What we've seen is a big bang deployment of rolling out to thousands of people on day one and turning the system on does not work, because like I said, coaching is where you get 86% productivity. If people only go to training, it's only 22%. So there's a big room for improvement, and that improvement comes through coaching. And you would never have enough coaches to coach all of your people at the same time. And so what happens if you train a lot of people and deploy it, the garbage builds up very quickly. And what you need to do, and then you're stuck with a big pile of garbage. So what you want to do is deploy to a wave of people that you have enough capacity to coach them until they get to a certain level, standard level of quality articles and they're following the workflow and their PIIs are at a certain level, and then deploy to a second wave of people. So what it really does first is establish credibility. So through word of mouth of the success of wave one, it will help with the adoption of the next group of people. And you'll not need to hire additional coaching resources in order to deploy to that many people. So you won't need additional coaching resources. Your coaches will be available to coach the wave two people, and it creates credibility with the program. So sustaining KCS has always kind of been an issue. Like I said, people have great initial adoptions and then it could fall off. So the vision helps with that. Leaders' behavior aligns and reinforces that vision. If leaders are saying one thing and doing something else, that always is a reason that KCS will fail. Providing knowledge workers with the visibility and impact of their contribution through reuse reports, customer self-service success. There's nothing better than a customer, coming back and saying, these articles helped save us from our system going down. And then third, making sure you drive business improvements. This is through the KDE activities and making sure that the B loop gets closed as lots of people are reporting particular issues. Fix the issue. Feed that knowledge back into the products to improve the processes or the products. So now getting into the KCS V6 principles. Like I said, none of these are new. They're just pulled out of the practices guide in a separate section, and the core concepts as well. So this simple diagram shows the principles around KCS. So starting with abundance, this is the more we share, the more we learn. So this principle of getting as many people as involved as we possibly can. This is the thing is if we get more publishers, we get more people interacting, we get the community and the customers interacting. The more we share, the more we learn. This is not a scarcity model. There is not a limited amount of knowledge out there. So making sure that we get as many people involved as we possibly can, both on creation and reuse and modification, and driving the questions as well. The other one is to create value. And so it's about working tasks, so working the A loop, but really thinking about the big picture and what that means. And that really the big picture is that I'm creating value by somebody else not having to answer this question again, or by delivering it to our customer, or by making better products because my knowledge is being used to fix the product. So if knowledge workers don't know that, what the value is in doing this, then they're not going to be willing to contribute their knowledge. Demand driven is that knowledge is a byproduct of interaction. And we always say with KCS, if the interaction doesn't happen, then don't bother creating knowledge, because we've all found that there's lots of product documentation sitting on the shelf that was created in anticipation of demand. So KCS says, unless there is a reason or there's some type of interaction that's driving us to either create this knowledge, reuse this knowledge, or improve this knowledge, we don't do it. So it's all as a byproduct of interaction. And then the trust piece is the middle, is what really engages, empowers, and motivates people is the trust in both our leadership, our organizations, and that we're doing something valuable. Trust, we provide people with the information they need to do their job and make good judgments. Trust what they do. Don't over-engineer their job. So this is, if you see anything on any of our literature, because we like to talk about this a lot, managers or leaders tend to over-engineer people's jobs, and instead of giving them a trusted environment and empowering people and engaging people. So a lot of systems tend to be over-engineered just so people don't make mistakes. But what we want to do is change that and make it, empower people and make them be able to use their capacities, capable of using all of the knowledge, all of the capacities that they have, and recognize them for that. And then deal with the exceptions as an exception. So when people don't do the right thing, don't change the whole system to prevent people from doing the right thing, to keep them from doing the wrong thing, if that makes sense. So we want the people doing the job to design the job and empower and engage and recognize those people, and handle the least capable people or as an exception. So that's where the trust comes in. And trust is earned from leaders. There's a book by, I think it's Stephen Covey, called The Speed of Trust that we refer to a lot, that leadership really has to walk the walk and earn the trust. So why these principles are important, and this always works. So if you're in the process of designing your KCS journey, or you're on your KCS journey, you can always ask these questions and make sure that the decisions that you're about to make adhere to this. So you can ask yourself, does it align to the principle of abundance? Is it demand driven? Are we focusing on value creation, not activities? And are we exhibiting trust? So those are checkpoints to continually ask yourself when you're working with KCS, if these apply, and are you adhering to these principles? Onto the core concepts. These are all built within all the KCS practices, so they're going to sound familiar to you. And I'm going to just pull them all up here first before I go through each one. As we know, KCS is about transformation, continuous improvement. This shows that we're continually modifying knowledge as we use it. Having buy-in at all levels of the organization. Leadership is required. We're looking at the collective experience, so everybody interacting with anyone interacting with the knowledge owns the knowledge, which means collective ownership. We're seeking to understand before we're seeking to solve. Creating knowledge that's sufficient to solve, integrating knowledge with our workflow, and coaching for success, and also measuring value. So these are just more details around the transformation, continuous improvement. Remember that we're looking at a double loop process. That's why there's an A loop and a B loop, and we're continually improving that loop as we get feedback. Buy-in at all levels, so people need to choose the right thing because they understand and care, not because they're forced to do something. Knowledge workers are volunteers. Active improving creating knowledge cannot be forced. And then, of course, leadership is required. We only volunteer what we care about. You need to know what's in it for me, make it easy to do the right thing, provide persistent visibility and impact to the contribution. The compounding effect around collective experience, collective ownership. The best people to create and maintain knowledge are the people who use it, which are the knowledge workers. Seek to understand the customer issue and also seek what we collectively know. Make sure that you search early and often in case the answer is already out there, that someone's not solving an issue that they could have looked up. And the article needs to be good enough, sufficient to be findable and usable by the intended audience. Knowledge integration needs to be part of the workflow without increasing handle time. So it's never been proven that doing KCS requires more time, as long as it's being done within the workflow, because people are answering the questions anyway, and they're writing it down anywhere, somewhere. So what we want to do is just not increase people's time to create knowledge, but become part of how they process the interactions. Coaching for success for first and second line managers is a good idea. The knowledge workers' behavior enables all the benefits. Behavior change requires some outside intervention, and this is where the coaching comes in. Remember to not put goals on activity. Goals go on outcomes, and measure value, and assessing who's creating value is hard but worthwhile. And the old phrase. It's not something we do in addition to solving problems, but it becomes the way we solve problems. So one other couple things I wanted to cover is around the use of the consortium intellectual property. So these materials and the practices guide, we put all this out under a Creative Commons license, which is the right to use with attribution, meaning you can use the materials as long as you attribute it to the Consortium for Service Innovation, but you cannot use our materials for commercial use. So you can't go out and build a business and sell our stuff and make money. It's for use of our members within their organizations and with you within your organizations. There are no derivative works allowed on the core. That's on the core concepts, and so they are what we called when we said in the governance thing what we had experience-based and the other term that I'm not thinking of right now, but so you cannot rewrite compliance-based. So the core concepts would adhere to compliance-based. So there are no derivative works around the principles and core concepts. They are written as is and should not be modified. Where on the practices guide, if you wanted to go off and create training materials for your colleagues, your peers, or even to do this bridge workshop for them, create your own version of these materials, as long as you're not selling them and as long as you give attribution to the Consortium for Service Innovation. And that's what that says. If you wanted to do it for commercial use, we have licenses to do that, but you people know who you are. These are more information around rights to use, which I think says all the same things in more legal blurb there. So that is all that I have. I haven't looked at the question, if there's any questions coming through. Kelly, do we have questions?
We don't currently have any questions in the chat, but we certainly have time for some.
Was there anyone listening to me? Because I'm just talking away. We could have been like on mute the whole time. Oh, good. People are
so many
now.
people
Oh,
are
good.
listening to you. Oh, excellent.
So I'm hoping that lots of registrations are coming through and people are seeing lots of passing the exam coming through in the next couple hours. I'd say if you're like me, just do it now and get it over with, and get it off your list of things to do.
And I will be sending out the recording, a link to the recording, and a link to all the links that I put in the chat. But we won't be sending out the actual PowerPoint. There's another question about, is the password login request supposed to be a long wait? I don't think so. If you haven't, if you've requested it and not received it, send an email to info@thekcsacademy.net, which I'm putting in the chat.
Right, with input, be sure to include the email that you think the password should be sent to, so we can check to see if that's the email that's in WebAssessor, because it could be sending it to a different email account.
One more question in here about what is the passing grade. Do you want to talk just for a moment about the fact that we don't publish the pass? So, sorry, there's another question coming in. Go ahead.
Yeah. So no, we do not publish the passing grade. The passing grade is what we felt would be high enough so that we felt that you knew the material. So it's a bar that we set, and it's set fairly high. It is only 23 questions, and it's open book. So it's you need to get the majority of the questions right. How to say that? So Kelly, do you want me to read these questions that I see coming through?
That would be great. Only
So
responding to
someone's asking if they can, if they don't have a credit card, if they can use PayPal, or is it possible to pay collectively for a number of people in the organization? Jill, do you want to address that question?
Yes, if you want to pay collectively for a number of people, if you can send me an email, or you can just send it to info@thekcsacademy.net, or you can send it to jvgraph@thekcsacademy.net. We can work that out.
And there, you can do PayPal
Yes.
within there. You just click, I forget where it is, but there, you can use PayPal. It's in the registration page. If you have trouble finding it, you could also email, but you can use PayPal. Sorry, my dog's now done with this conference call. Does it make sense to take the practice exam first? No, absolutely not. Do not take the practice exam. Because first of all, it costs the same amount of money as this exam, and you've probably already taken it before, and the new questions are not part of the practice exam. The practice exam is only meant to give you a feel for the structure of the questions. So just be a feel for how the exam works and reading the questions and marking them, you know, how they're multiple choice. It really isn't a test of what you know. So I'd say no. And if you've already taken the practices B5 exam, you already understand how the whole test is set up.
I think that we are caught up on questions now.
So thank you, everyone, and good luck. Look forward to seeing you all pass the bridge exam. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.